The prophet Isaiah mimics the cries of the vendors in a marketplace. Ho, or yo, come, buy. I have things for you to eat. I have things for you to wear. I have these things. Their loud calls could be heard in any Near East market, voices competing with one another to get attention and capture the sale. Some of us have experienced those souks or those marketplaces in that part of the world, and it's pretty wild. As you walk through, and there's all these voices calling, and there's so much color, and there's so many wonderful smells that you can get so distracted and get lost in the myriad of alleys in those marketplaces. Some of you have been to flea markets that kind of feel like that, where everybody's yelling at you to buy something. And I guess that's how I picture Wall Street as they're buying and trading stocks, just everybody talking all at the same time. But the prophet asks us to listen for a different kind of message. Ho, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. And you who have no money, come, buy and eat. You can come and have water and food. Come, because God prepares a table. Isn't this a wonderful image down here? God is preparing a feast for us. God is expecting us. God gives us more than simple bread and simple things to drink. God offers us the rich, rich food of God's wisdom and love and salvation. Isaiah in these words is basically saying, listen, God is trying to tell us all something, that our lives may have become so busy and distracted listening to all these other voices that are all around us that we've lost touch with ourselves, that we've forgotten that we are God's beloved, created in the image of God, and our spirits become homesick and thirsty and starving for that love and grace. And then you add the marketplace of the poor who are frustrated because without money, there's never a chance of being able to be at the table. There is no one who has not at God's table. All are welcome and all will receive. We have to think in this season of Lent, this time when we turn our lives back to God, about our own hungers, our own thirsts. And we wonder, can you really be thirsty and not even know it? And some of us have traveled to climates with high heat or humidity, and you know how quickly you can become dehydrated. So you drink water as much as you can, whether you feel thirsty or not. And this is the image that I thought of with Isaiah, who basically is saying, stop. Stop listening to all these other things that are drawing you away. Stop and drink from the well of God's love and grace. You need to do this all the time, whether you think you need God or not. It's a spiritual practice to continue to pray and turn to God and to allow our lives to be filled with the feast of God's grace and love. In Isaiah's vision, everyone is included. Everyone can be filled by the goodness of God. Everyone who is hungry is invited to eat. You don't have to pay and fill up your life with junk food or with flashy stuff that goes out of style. We know that there's all kinds of things that promise to satisfy us, and they end up wasting calories and money and our time and our energy. So in this season of Lent, when we're asked to return to God and to turn our lives back to God, Isaiah gives us this invitation to come. Come to the table. Come to the table that God sets for us. God sets these tables of mercy and grace, we read in the Psalms, even in the midst of our enemies. But God continues to set tables of love and grace. But we have to pull up the chair. We have to get to the table. We have to choose to partake. Isaiah asks us to buy into God's love and grace, not with money, but with a decision to recommit ourselves to that relationship with God. We're invited by the prophet to eat, to partake, to experience the goodness of God. We're invited to seek and to listen to God, to pay attention to God's voice, to take the time to be attuned to God's voice in the midst of the noises that draw our attention away. We're invited to forsake. That's a really strong Bible word. Forsake or abandon or turn away from whatever is holding us back from our relationship with God. Let those things go because they're not filling us up with the food that will last. And then return to God to receive God's goodness and mercy. This is the season when we return to that which lasts and we consider how we fill our lives. We who are hungry and thirsty are invited to turn our lives, our souls, our spirits to God. And the image Isaiah paints isn't one of us going through the fast food line at one of our lovely fast food restaurants. The image that Isaiah paints is a banquet table. Imagine a banquet table that's just filled with everything we could possibly imagine. And that banquet table is there and it can fill us, and it doesn't cost 1 penny. But it does invite us to commit our lives. The prophet does ask us, why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, for that which doesn't last, for that which does not really fill up our hunger? Why do we buy that stuff that we think will give us satisfaction but doesn't? And why do we spend our labor or our time for that which does not satisfy, when we know that our time given in our relationships with God and our family and our friends and in service to our neighbors near and far is what fills us up and gives us hope for the living of these days? I love what poet Mary Oliver asks. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? How are we going to spend our lives? Will we accept God's invitation to abundant life? Will we accept God's invitation to a banquet of food and drink that is really overflowing with mercy and pardon for those who return to God? It's a table of mercy. It's a table of abundance. It's a table of God's grace that's set in places we can't even imagine. And everyone is welcome. All. Thanks be to God. Amen.